Chapter 257 to 258. Danzo had a few bad days behind himself. When he came back from the emergency council meeting he organized, he found out the 3 of his 5 remaining Root and Bu were killed while guarding his house. He couldn't even think about how Tsunade managed that feat, considering she was present at the said meeting. He was far too angry and, he loathed to admit it, slightly fearful. His house was, after all, overstuffed with protective seals and traps. On another, more important note, his power base in the village was slowly evaporating, and all it took for this to happen was 4 days. It was maddening. Years of work gone just like that. First, his root was annihilated, which was arguably a crippling blow that set him back by at least a decade, but it was not that big of a deal. He could recover from it. All he needed was time and good usage of his 5 remaining subordinates. Second, Tsunade came back like a whirlwind. And then everything went to shits. First, she got Hiruzen out of his seat with one expert and utterly unavoidable move. She simply exerted her right as the descendant of Hashirama, and nobody could refute that. But that single move shook the village on a fundamental level, and she did that without even using a single punch. Danzo really did not expect a brute like Tsunade to use politics and good arguments of all things. If that was it, then all would have been great in the world. But Tsunade just had to dismiss Koharu and Homura, smoothly taking out the more important half of Danzo's support base in the council, as if to spite him. Worse yet, the second half that resided among the civilians was properly cowed by Tsunade's ploy. At any other time, he would have applauded her, thinking that there was finally somebody acting as a Kage should, not covering before the civilians. Now, though, she effectively crippled him politically in under 20 minutes flat using only words. It was him who was supposed to be the master manipulator in the village, damn it. And then, when he thought it simply couldn't get any worse, he came home and found 3 of his remaining 5 operatives dead, their bodies mockingly placed on the couch so they would be the first thing he saw after entering the living room. Danzo's sense of urgency increased many-fold after that. He was being attacked by Tsunade, who was pretentious enough to even let him know his failings are the result of her sabotage, and he could not do anything about it. As desperation and a bit of despair set in, he decided to go to the Hokage and try his luck on influencing the man a bit. While trying to fool a Nara was indeed very foolish, Danzo knew the trick in tricking them was in being indirect. He could not manipulate Shikaku directly, using misdirection on the facts the man knew about. Shikaku would have analyzed it in seconds and see right through Danzo. No, Danzo had to use facts Shikaku had no idea about, then he had to portray his agenda believingly and logically with the support of facts that Shikaku did know, so he could make his own image. It was all in the wording and the hard facts he was about to use. He would not directly state Tsunade was in the criminal organization Yozora. The Nara and Senju clan were allies, and in the end, it wouldn't really even matter. No. His plan was simply to get Yozora declared as the enemies of Konoha first, and only then oust Tsunade as a member, and then branch from there. The fact that Shikaku had no reaction during the emergency council meeting when she showed the Yozora mark, Danzo reasoned that the man had no idea about it. It was time to exploit that lack of knowledge. Oh, Danzo had no doubt this would be a rigorous path filled with many obstacles, and it was apparent he would have to avoid Tsunade detecting his machinations. For that purpose, he made sure she would be swarmed with paperwork by the civilian businessmen who were renting land from her. Danzo Shimura is here to see you, Shikaku. Should I let him in?" That sentence brought Danzo back to the present. He always could pull wool over Hiruzen's eyes, and while Shikaku Nara was definitely a whole magnitude smarter than the old monkey, he was also a lot less experienced. "Yes, send him in." Danzo heard Shikaku's voice sound from within the Hokage office. It was showtime. Without even waiting for Yoshino to present him, he calmly but confidently strode past her, right into the office with his head held high. Thank you for accepting me on such short notice, Lord Hokage. Those words left his mouth with a great reluctance while he discreetly looked around the empty office. Now that Hiruzen's things were no longer inside, it was really somewhat barren. For some reason, the sight brought sadness to Danzo's heart, which he promptly squashed. "No problem, Shimura-san." Shikaku's eye twitched, almost as if in amusement. "You will have to excuse me, but I do not have much time nowadays. Please state your business so we can move on." Danzo frowned at such bluntness. He loved obedient bluntness from his subordinates, but this was time for politicking. There was no place for such straightforward dismissal. "Very well," he said, put out. "I came to warn you about the threat of Yozora. As you probably know, they are responsible for a series of murders inside of our village. That simply can't go unanswered. We will look like fools in front of other villages if that comes out," he coldly stated, fully counting on the information getting out. He did put a lot of work into making preparations to spread rumors about it. You might not know about it, but Yozora is a less-known group of S-rank criminals who 7 years ago made a fool out of every single hidden village bar Konoha. These incidents, however, can be called just small pranks compared to the outright act of slaughter that was committed in our village. Will you let the murder of our villagers go unanswered, Lord Hokage? Danzo thanked his foresight to register fake identities for his root Anbu and make them full-fledged villagers. At least now they could not simply be overlooked. "About that?" Shikaku sighed, causing Danzo to lean forward. "You will have to consult with her." He pointed behind Danzo, who stiffened. Slowly turning around, Danzo was caught flat-footed as the air shimmered around a certain spot on the couch, revealing a smug-looking Tsunade who eyed him like an animal who is desperately clutching at straws to run from her. "So you have a problem with Yozora, eh, Danzo?" Tsunade grinned. "How do we know the 200 kills are not your job, though?" "Excuse me?" Danzo snapped, not expecting such a comeback. "You are quite famous in the village for being a schemer and someone with a lot of secrets. It would have been so easy to prearrange the evidence. Picking a target such as Yozora, a group that seldom shows itself, was definitely smart. They are not very well known to the average ninjas, while they would hardly defend themselves from the accusation since nobody heard from them for years. Yes, with your track record, this is definitely something you would have done, Danzo. So give us proof it was not your doing." Tsunade relished pinning the blame on him. He might have been the next coming of sunshine out of the ass in the civilians' eyes, but anyone above Chunin rank knew well who Danzo Shimura really was and what he did for a living. Or at least they knew some rumors that were enough of a warning to get mixed up with him. "I was at the council meet..." He gritted his teeth. "Inconclusive. You could have prepared it beforehand. You know that. Your entire trade is about things like that." Tsunade indifferently shrugged. "You demand proof I did not commit a crime perpetrated on me?" Danzo crossly asked. "Bullshit." Tsunade chuckled. "There was no crime perpetrated on you. There was, however, a crime perpetrated in your living room. Now, if I know anything about you, it is that you are a quite accomplished seal master focusing on security seals. How could anyone just walk inside your own living room that is over-trapped with various seals, set up a crime scene without setting even one of the said seals off, and then leave with no one the wiser about his identity? And on top of that, you want us to believe it was actually done by a group of people who nobody saw or heard from for the last 6 years? Are you taking us for total idiots?" Tsunade looked mockingly at him as if he was stupid, causing him to gape at her audacity. The realization of what exactly he was overlooking as if slapped Danzo right on the head the second Tsunade uttered these words. "Yeah. No. Pull another one." Shikaku nodded in agreement. He knew something was suspicious in that entire matter, but now that Tsunade pointed out Danzo's house was basically a death trap for anyone other than the owner, he gave Danzo a suspicious look. "Parts of over 200 bodies were found in your house. Are you sure you don't have anything to say about that?" Hearing Shikaku, Danzo shut his mouth with a click. In a huff, he turned around and walked right through the door without even excusing himself. That bitch played me from the start to the beginning, he gravely thought as the door closed behind him. Inside the office, Shikaku looked weirdly at Tsunade. You know he will get away with it, right? There is no conclusive evidence to prove his involvement. I still have no idea why you are letting him live. From what you divulged about the Uchiha clan's demise, he deserves to be executed. Moreover, I am not stupid. This is personal for you. I can see that. Putting the facts together was not a hard thing, Tsunade. He is definitely responsible for the Senju clan's demise too, and you either have proof or at least heavily suspect so. You would never be so ferocious towards him if it was not like that. He drawled. So, why not just kill him and be done with it? Tsunade lifted her eyebrow and snorted in distaste. Killing him. That would have been a mercy. He did a lot of nasty stuff, but he also did a lot of good for the village. So, no, Shikaku. I don't want him dead. I want him to live. To live in despair and desperation. To be frustrated, scared, on his toes at all times. To feel his hope slowly fade. I want him to suffer the worst fate imaginable for a ninja. The feeling of uselessness and hopelessness as a trap closes in. I will systematically take away his options, destroying any and all influence he has in the village, leaving him alone, isolated, and without any support. And when I deem he gave up enough resistance, I will permanently seal his chakra and throw the keying matrix to the sea. She finished with a finality that inwardly horrified Shikaku, causing him to slightly shiver. Giving her a deadpan look in order to cover the chill that went up his spine, Shikaku groaned before quietly muttering, "Troublesome woman." A week after Rei and Pakura finished their business in Sunagakure, Rei, alongside his girls, were sitting in the dining room of his mansion in the village on the other side, enjoying their breakfast. It was during the said breakfast that Tsunade finally came back, surprising them. Well, look at that. The lost lamb finally found her way home. Rei invitingly smiled at Tsunade, gesturing to an empty chair, while Konan wordlessly stood up in order to prepare another set of tableware for her. Tsunade slightly blushed, reminding herself that informing no one of her activities might not have been the best idea, but these thoughts quickly perished under her excitement. She couldn't wait for Rei's reaction once she revealed her accomplishment. Sorry? I just needed to do something. Before anyone could interrupt, Tsunade quickened her talking pace. On the other hand, I have finished and I acquired a gift for you, Rei, she exuberantly exclaimed, widely grinning from ear to ear with a praise-me look in her vividly amber eyes. Rei stopped his fork midway to his half-opened mouth and looked at Tsunade. He was incredibly curious about what she was up to. Disappearing for more than a month? That was something he would have expected from Mei, and if it happened, it would have indeed been frustrating. As for Tsunade, he trusted Tsunade to know better. Mei would most likely have caused a scene in a few days, but Tsunade had no such problem. Hence, Rei let Tsunade be and waited until she came back home from whatever self-imposed quest she went on. A gift? He lifted his eyebrow at her while putting his fork down. Yes, Tsunade beamed. Did I forget some kind of anniversary? Rei turned to Konan with an appalled look and whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, causing many of them to giggle, including Konan as she shook her head. Turning back to Tsunade, Rei furrowed his brows at her. It was not common in their household to give each other gifts. Sure, there were birthdays, but even then, while not completely dismissed, it somehow became unimportant as time went by and they lived together. Rei was aware most of his seals were perceived as gifts by the girls, even though he never intended them to be such. With Ringo and him constantly forgetting themselves in their individual research, to the point of forgetting their own birthdays and having to be dragged to the parties by Tsunade or Konan, with Konan and Tsunade taking care of the Biribiri and Uzushio Trading Company, with Pakura taking care of the administrative village affairs while May was her everyday daredevil, ordinary gifts were something they simply did not exchange anymore. There were many other ways to show they cared about each other after all. Hence, Rei was really curious about what Tsunade was about to pull off. Even the other women around the table started to get curious. Tsunade was never one to be extremely excitable. Not like this. From Tsunade's expression, they could all feel that whatever revelation she was about to drop on them, it will most likely be enormous. Tsunade approached Rei and leaned closer towards him with an expectant smile upon her lips. She started only to stop herself for a second, and a small burst of smoke suddenly appeared, notifying the people in the room about the use of a low-powered storage scroll, preventing them from getting jumpy. Rei suddenly found his vision obscured by a hem of a hat, narrowing his eyes while grabbing the hem and yanking the hat off his head, only to owlishly blink as he somehow saw the Hokage hat in his hand. "I have used the Konoha Creation Act and became the daimyo of Konoha," Tsunade proudly proclaimed, causing the people in the room to incredulously gawk at her. "Congratulations!" Konan was the first who shook herself out of her bewilderment and graced Tsunade with a warm, approving smile. "Way to go!" May cheered. "Won't the Hokage miss it, though?" She cutely tilted her head with mischief sparkling in her eyes. "I doubt it. My new Hokage didn't notice his hat missing for 3 days straight." Tsunade shrugged. "As long as I return it in under a week, it can be written off as him being forgetful." "Gee, have fun with the paperwork." Ringo good-naturedly interrupted with a snort before returning to her cereals. "What's that supposed to mean, you red-headed hag? She became a princess and you snort at her? Have you no manners?" May indignantly defended Tsunade, only to get an annoyed and deadpan stare from Ringo. "First, you have red hair too, you midget. Second, I am from Kiri. They did not exactly teach us manners in the academy. Just look at yourself." Ringo scathingly clicked her tongue, getting a scowl from May in return. "You?" Needless to say, the two bickering redheads were quickly toned out by the other occupants of the room. "If you need help with anything, just say. I will probably have my hands full with managing Swangakure since I don't have people who will happily do my job for me like someone." Pakura gave Ringo a pointed look, her lips thinning as she noticed Ringo was too preoccupied with May to notice her disapproval. Giving up her endeavor, Pakura shook her head and gazed back at Tsunade. "But I will always make time for you," she promised, knowing she was the best at the pure administrative work out of all of her sister wives. "Thank you," Tsunade nodded. "But I really don't have many responsibilities. I made sure of it when I took over the position of the daimyo of Konoha. I gave away a bit of my influence to other Konoha clans, but with it went most of my paperwork and negotiations with people. There is not much workload for me," she explained, causing Pakura to become introspective. "Should I do the same?" Pakura thought with a pondering look, and just like that, the people in the room knew nobody, Sans Rei, would be able to get her out of her funk anytime soon. The only one who was not cheering was Rei, who stared at the Hokage hat in shock as if somebody murdered his puppy by disemboweling it. It didn't take long for the rest of the cheering crowd to notice him acting weird, especially since, despite answering the congratulations, Tsunade's eyes didn't leave his form. She was really not liking his far too stunned look. Something is not right. Tsunade understood and slowly approached Rei, putting her hand on his shoulder. "Are you all right? Is it that shocking?" she asked with a tone of uncertainty. Rei blinked again and slowly looked at her, wordlessly opening his mouth only to close it with an audible click a few seconds later in a show of speechlessness. A difficult look passed through his visage before a long, insufferable sigh tore from his throat. "Yeah," he drawled. "I have to say, this is totally my fault. I just had to jinx it, didn't I?" He chuckled helplessly. I should have told you to let Konoha be for the time being. He gave the bewildered Tsunade a reassuring smile as he put his hand on the one she placed on his shoulder to make her understand he was not angry as he said his next words. With this little stunt, you totally ruined my plans, Tsunade.